Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Harley Quinn. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we are picking up with Ivy still continuing to try and continue her work with trying to perfect the whole thing to terraform Gotham into that Eden and paradise that she's trying to make it into. We also catch up with Frank. I thought like Frank transforming the way he did was going to be an issue. It's like, nah, Frank's just out and about, just cool. It's like, right, he's kind of like the foundation. It didn't work. Like, he has all these powers and stuff, but it's still very limited to what he can pollinate. So Ivy's got to expand upon that to make it work. But the problem is she's surrounded with the others and they're distracting her. And I think it's so sweet that Ivy doesn't, just like her and Harley are basically don't want to screw things up. So Harley kind of went along with stuff that might not interest her too much, just simply because it interests Ivy. So, both of them have a hard time being 100% honest with each other. So Ivy doesn't tell Harley when she's just being annoying. It's like, oh, I need you to go away. Stop. Don't use the Japanese toilet. Oh, don't use any musical equipment she stole because that's going to be an issue. So, which I love the band that they're starting. I even love it. What was the line? Basically, it was like, Ivy's no wussing. That's why tonight I'm going to eat her pussy or something like that. I was like, yo, this show goes wild, bro. I love it. But I get it. It's also like, right, Ivy doesn't want confrontation. It's that thing of like, right, I'm just going to make up excuses just so I don't have to hurt someone's feelings. Like, it's never a good thing to hurt someone's feelings, which we kind of get into that a little bit later on, and we'll talk about it then. But I think kind of a byproduct of like why like Ivy's like that in particular when it comes to relationships. And I guess when you even look back on her and Kite Man, she was never always 100% honest with him. She always kind of held back on some regards just to like spare his feelings. So, but I love Frank is like, ooh, kind of calling her out, saying that's a little bitch move. That's a bitch ass move, like doing that. Just like tell her she's being annoying, but she found roundabout ways to handle it. Got her work done. Yeah, let's go out to that macaroni place or whatever it's called. Came back, Frank is gone. So it's like, oh, Frank got kidnapped, and all they found was a pin that said, it was a Court of Owls pin. I was like, wait, we're doing the Court of Owls in this? Yes. And I love, jumping around a little bit. I love that it's just like, even Joker later on says like, yeah, it used to be this powerful secret society, and now it's just like, no, just a whole bunch of straight white dudes like jerking themselves off. They're not the powerful entity that they once were, which I love to think about that in this continuity. It's like, yeah, they used to be top dogs when it came to evil organization, but oh, how the mighty have fallen. I wonder what went wrong. I guess it's just like maybe new membership over the years, because the society's been around for like at least 100 years. So I guess over time, new people came in and just like the villainy isn't what it used to be, I guess, with just everything going down in Gotham. But I love that they went to Joker for information about it. And it's like, he's like, oh yeah, they have a meeting every Wednesday. She's like, Wednesdays? You always told me you were going to play softball. He's like, I lied. What grown man plays softball? And I love that at the same time, we also get to see Joker being a father. He's helping his son with homework, and he's trying not to flip out, which I'm like, that's actually kind of relatable, because, I've seen my sisters and my mom helping, like, my sister and helping our niece or her son, my nephew, or my mom helping her grandkids like with homework and stuff, and it's like, oh, none of this makes sense, and it's frustrating. Obviously they're not the Joker, so they're not going to have the reaction that they do, and it's like, wait, draw to explain the answer, who fucking cares? And throws lap. She's like, I'm sorry about that, buddy, you want to go get boba? Like, that's the thing of like, you never thought you'd see the Joker as a father. Like, I don't know. Well, he technically has a kid, maybe, possibly, because there's a character that is claiming to be his daughter who's from the comics, because she's going to be in the Gotham Knight show in the CW, but apparently that character's also claimed to be the daughter of other supervillains too, so it's like, so I don't know if she's like legitimately the Joker's daughter. They might be kind of leaning into it with Gotham Knights, but it's like, yeah, like maybe it's happened from time to time in the comics, but I've never known him to have a daughter that's ever, like, any relationship that's ever come up is like, right, his relationship with Batman and his relationship with Harley, that's all that ever comes up to. So, but for me, that's the first time ever seeing him in a father figure role, so it's so weird. Especially last episode, he was thanking his kids when he took Harley and Ivy's award for like best couple or whatever, so At the same time, this is all going down. The mayor is still alive. I was like, oh, I thought he was super dead. It's like, no, he's got campaign ads with him with the pole stabbed through his chest. And it's like, yeah, he's still winning. It's like, wait, why are people trying to vote for him? He can't even piss on his own. It's like, yeah, but now this perspective is you are running against a guy in a coma, so it makes you that much of a piece of shit. And it's like, what, 50 some people are like that. He's like, oh, so then 40 some must be inside. No, 20% of them, God, what was it? They just didn't like Jim, and then like 15% talked about they didn't understand carpool karaoke, because it's just like you're just in your car singing, and it's like, oh, it seems like they must be confusing you with James Corden. I'm like, yes, I love it. And obviously Barbara's talking about like running sincerely, and then Two-Face is laughing like, oh, no. What you do is you pay off people. That's how you win. I mean, God, it's like, it's cynical, but it's like, that's how you grease the wheels in politics. And so she's telling her dad to run with sincerity and stuff like that. But Two-Face is like, nah, you got to get in good with the Carmine Falcones, the Ra's al Ghuls. There was also that person he mentioned. He was like, wow, he's still alive? Wow, I guess God really doesn't exist. I was like, Jesus, Jim. But it's like, yeah, Jim's like, nah, I'm a go about getting money. Like, where I find these filthy rich people. He ends up going to the Court of Owls meeting where, like, apparently they can't sacrifice goats anymore because it's inhumane to make those sacrifices, so they have to use a piñata because newer members. I love that whole thing because it's just like, I mean, I think it's kind of like a little bit of a commentary of like, yeah, even these villain organizations have people in it who are like, would be kind of established as quote unquote woke, and it's just like, yeah, like this is, or like, at least not, that would, well, I'm sure that I mean, we saw that last episode with Firefly's, like, one of his goons, once again, woke goon as they labeled him. But I think it's just like, right, there are probably like animal lovers in the group that are just like, no, we're not going to sacrifice animals, like not in an inhumane way of treating them like that. So they immediately get to cocktails and stuff like that. Jim is in there. And I love the whole, him running it to, I was like, wait, is that Bruce? And it totally was. I was like, oh, he's like, yeah, I got to keep an eye on things inside. He's like, because at first he's like, wait, I recognize that jawline. And I love that if you look at the way he's turned and the shadow is in the form of Batman, but it's like, hey, Bruce Wayne. He's like, don't worry. Like, he's like, oh, you should endorse me. Batman's endorsing me. No, he didn't. Well, yeah, I mean, he hasn't made it public yet. And later on, Bruce is like, Jim, if I write you a check, will you leave me alone? He's like, yeah, buddy. Yeah. So I love that. And I guess Bruce, at first I was like, oh, is Bruce here just to keep an eye on this secret society? I'm like, I don't think he's a part of it. Which, I mean, maybe it just depends on the continuity, because I know in Gotham, Bruce had ties to the Court of Owls because I know his uncle's a part of it, and I think his dad was too. Maybe? Which his uncle was played by James Remar, who was also in Black Lightning. So, interesting DC crossover in that regard. Just thought about that right now. Anyway. And while they're there looking for Frank, Ivy and Harley, they she confronts Bane, being like, you stole, right? He was like, no, like, I was at a therapy session. We really kind of got into some stuff that I needed to work out. And it's like, oh, it's about, you guys would probably have a good idea. And Harley's like, I have no idea what, like, why would we know what you're bringing up in therapy? He's like, because you won't give me back the pasta maker. I'm like, really? Really, Bane? You're still on it? Come on, my dude. But it's also like, I guess it's like, I guess from a therapy standpoint, it's like, right, it's a much bigger thing than that, but he's just focusing on the pasta maker because he is the butt of everyone's joke. He's always kind of like treated like bottom tier, and I guess it's like he needs some kind of victory. He wants to be taken seriously to some extent. So it's like, right, having this small victory of getting the pasta maker back might fill that void in him, but it's like, no, it's much bigger. He's just using the pasta maker as a placeholder to some extent rather than dealing with everything else that he's really supposed to be dealing with. I love that Ivy confronted a guy being like, hey, what were you doing Wednesday? He was like, oh, I was teaching my kindergarten class. She's like, that's super upsetting. And then Catwoman being the agent of chaos when Harley confronts her about everything. It's like, oh, you're the one who wouldn't let us use the toilet. And she's like, no, the person you have issues with is Ivy, not me. That turns into a whole confrontation. Now it's like, yeah, of course that was going to come out. But then also Sai, who's now just kind of like the home computer now. They got him hooked up at Catwoman's place. Is basically like, yo, Harley smashed all the cameras and it'll fit. It's like, right, that was a byproduct of Ivy's lie. So they're kind of going at each other. And then Harley brings up like, oh, like, Catwoman told me about you and her. And turns out the two of them were in a relationship. And it's like, wait, what? She's like, why am I hearing about this? He's like, wasn't even a relationship. Like, we hooked up like 4 years ago. And it was never even a real relationship. And it's like, well, why didn't you tell me? So I knew you'd react like this. Which obviously Harley was heartbroken to hear that. It's just like, okay, I see how it is. But then Ivy does apologize. And this is where I was saying, like, it really kind of, I think, plays into why she is the way she is kind of in certain relationships. Why she's almost kind of this people pleaser when it comes to relationship. Like, she doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. It's because she talks about, like, right, she was into Catwoman, and it, like, she wanted it to be more of a thing, but it wasn't. And she's like, I wanted more of a thing, but Catwoman never wanted it to be more than that. And I knew that, but still, I was wrapped around her finger, and you're like, Jesus, look at Bruce. Once again, like, Bruce isn't here for other people. I think maybe he justifies it as that, but I think he's mainly here because Catwoman wanted to be here, and she's getting delight over like Harley and Ivy kind of blowing up like that. And she's like, oh, their emotional turmoil is kind of, I'm getting off on. And I'm like, why is she doing that? And I was like, that's super effed up. Like, I wonder, is it just because like her and Ivy have history? So is it almost that thing of like, yeah, but you were my plaything and I don't like you being with anyone else. And if you are, I just like to cause, I mean, maybe because she's just the agent of chaos she is. But it was like, yo, that's some fuck shit, dude. Like stirring up trouble in someone else's relationship. But I also get Ivy too. It's like, should you really have to tell people you were in a... But to be fair, they've been around Catwoman a couple of times. You probably should have known them ahead of time. But I'm also like, it's kind of none of Harley's business. It's like, I mean, because it's not like, not unless Harley has asked, like, who have you been with? I mean, you know she's been with Kite Man, but I guess it's like, right, you were there for that relationship. But I guess it also is a thing of, oh, you had a thing with Catwoman, and we're staying at Catwoman's place. I guess that'll make you kind of feel a certain way, because it's like, oh, like, you didn't tell me something like that. Why not? But it's like, yeah, because like she just manipulated me and used me. I was like wrapped around her finger. And so that's why I think there's that part of her that's like a people pleaser. But this also adds context to like her dynamic with Catwoman. What was it like? Was it season 1 or season 2 that her and Harley were hanging around Catwoman? And she always bent over backwards because she was like, oh my God, Catwoman's so cool and everything. But now we realize, you know, obviously they're probably retroactively adding that now with the context that they hooked up in the past. But now it retroactively does add context to like, oh, that's why Ivy bent over backwards so much for her, because like, oh, this is the woman I always was a people pleaser to, not just because she's so awesome, it's also because like I was super in love with her at one point in time. I wanted to be in a relationship with her, and now it's like, yo, like that's why she bent over backwards for her, because it's like there was some part of her still wrapped around Selena's fingers, and it's like, oh, that makes thinking back on that episode even sadder now, having that context. But now for her, it's like, now she's glad she didn't want to talk about it because she felt so like pitiful being in that situation. But now it's like, now being with Harley, she knows what it's like to really love somebody and to be loved in return. So it's like, it's nothing like a relationship with Catwoman. So I thought it was a beautiful thing. I also skipped over the fact is, and this isn't just like this, it was a secret society, which I guess every secret society has that context of potentially being a sex related thing, but it's just like, yo, superhero properties going hard with the orgies. All right, first is this, and slight spoilers, but not really. It was a big enough thing. I'm sure most people watched it. HeroGasm in The Boys. It's like, yo, the timing, and that guy. I love. Well, first and foremost, I love there's that Lube that's a subsidiary of Luthor Corp. Which interesting connection there, because Lex Luthor is voiced by Giancarlo Esposito, who was also in The Boys as Stan Edgar. So just interesting parallels there too. But it's like that, like it's like as they're having their conversation, that guy's jerking himself off, like, "Oh God, can you lower it down to like a subtle roar?" And then Harley kicks the dude. He's like, "No, annihilate my taint." I'm like, what the fuck, dude? I was like, words you never thought you'd hear in a DC related property. Quote, annihilate my taint. End quote. That's amazing, dude. And it's just like, because I also, like, I mean, now it also makes context, probably makes sense also, I mean, on many different levels, why they probably want to include the whole, like, Batman going down on Catwoman thing, because it's like, dude, they're going balls to the wall with this. Like, I mean, there's been, like, genitals and stuff like that, but I mean, this is the first orgy in the show. They went, like, balls, I mean, no pun intended, but balls to the wall. And Gordon has no idea what's going on in his a phone is slipping, inadvertently ends up taking a whole bunch of pictures of everyone there, including Bruce, which there's no clear indication that it's Bruce, but I guess it's enough to be like, hey, we can blackmail these people. It's like, you know what's better than money? It's like, oh, the love of a woman? It's like, what? No, blackmail. And I'm like, yeah, I figured as much. It's like, that's a villainous thing to do. It's like, oh, you buffoon, you ended up coming out on top regardless. So it's like, yeah, you're going to blackmail. You think a secret society would kind of like, I mean, but once again, they're not the secret society once where they've fallen from grace. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see who ends up getting outed next episode, which obviously makes you wonder, is she going to get, well, he got a picture of him and Bruce, but there's no correlation to like Catwoman or anything. Like, I don't know if would that hurt her reputation or anything like that. It'd be funny if she got caught with Bruce Wayne or something like that, and that kind of, I don't know, we'll see. I think that her and Bruce being a thing, they're going to probably break up partway through the season or probably by the end of the season, but I'm curious to see like the continuation of that being like a background thing. But luckily, Harley and Ivy made up in the end. It all worked out. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, we were so focused on this, we still never found out who had Frank because they were supposed to be looking for the person with a mole on the ass. And it's like, wait, someone broke into the place, stole Frank, and then took a shit inside. I was like, I'm not sure if it was necessarily in that order. So we never found out. We still walked away not having any idea who stole Frank. And part of me was like, well, once again, I know Psycho's supposed to be in this scene, but like, I'm like, well, because Psycho's like, it's weird to say, but like he's got a darker skin tone and like that than the moley ass. And I was like, you would think they probably would have seen what his ass looks like. Maybe, I don't know. We'll find out soon enough, I guess, on whose moley ass that belongs to and why they decided to take Frank and what that's all about. That's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.